All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I'm here with someone who is new to the show, but definitely not new to the local music scene. I was just in kind of looking back at some of the projects you've been in. I have albums by some of the projects you've been in, and you've been in quite a number of them over the years. So I think the best way to start this off, I know we're talking about on this episode what you're working on now, but you do have a pretty interesting history sort of in Manitoba music. So I'm hoping that you could maybe give some background on where you've come from and where you are now and what you're doing now as an artist.
Yeah, well, my name is Ariane Jean, born and raised in Winnipeg, from like born in a French family. So, French is my first language. Both my parents are musicians, and so there was always a lot of music around the house. My dad was a professional musician. My mom was kind of in the closet a little bit. She was a classical pianist, but she never plays anymore. She only played kind of secretly when we were kids. And so yeah, from an early age, I was kind of surrounded by music and listening to their records or my dad playing, and those are my earliest influences. And I was really, really shy kid, so I only sang in the closet myself, and when nobody was home. And although I knew that this is what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a singer, I wanted to do shows and stuff, but I was so shy. So I didn't sing outside of the house until I was in high school.
Oh well.
And when I finally did start doing shows, I was really lucky. I had a lot of good friends that were musicians, so it kind of all fell into place for me to just be able to start doing gigs. And when I started doing gigs, it just kind of rolled from there. I ended up doing kind of local French kind of competition stuff, that brought me eventually to like a national or international competition, and on the French side of things.
Yeah.
And then from there, I just joined a few different bands. So my first official band, like that was more professional, I guess, is Madrigaya. And so my first experience touring with Madrigaya, I was quite young. I was late teens,
Okay. Okay.
just turning into an adult when we started touring and making music together. And from there, after Madrigaya ended, I founded with a few of the other girls, Shikami.
Yeah.
And that was the band that kind of took me all over the place. And where I really started to hone my songwriting chops, because in Madrigaya we were mostly doing we were borrowing music from different cultures, and we were an a cappella band that with a lot of vocalists.
Yeah,
So
there was a lot of people in that
that's
group.
kind of where yeah, we were like I think the most vocalists we were at one time was about seven. And but that's kind of another place I honed my chops as a singer, and I developed my ear further for harmony, and then also just composition, trying to build songs with just vocals. It was kind of an interesting exercise. And from there, with Shikamin, we just continued that and kind of developed into songwriting and more arranging and stuff. So yeah, and then after Shikamin, I think I left Shikamin before the end of Shikamin, because I just needed to step back for my own mental health. And I was a little bit lost after that. I was I didn't quite know what to do with myself. I knew that I wanted to keep doing music, but I kind
Yeah.
of stepped back from the spotlight and did more kind of backup vocals for different local bands, didn't tour really. Um, yeah, so local bands on the French side and the English side. I do stuff with JP Ho still, and doing that kind of stuff kind of became my main gig, until I decided to, out of the blue, kind of launch a solo project, and which turned into Sala, which is what I'm doing now.
Right, that's what we want to talk about. I mean, I definitely recognize your name from Chic. I mean, like for sure. That's the main group that I recognize your name from, and
Yeah,
that was a very successful group. I mean, in terms of a band that got a lot
yeah,
of recognition outside of Winnipeg and outside of Manitoba. Obviously, that helps with whatever project you were going to be going to afterwards. I mean, doing it solo, you have all this experience now from touring and from recording and from being in these bands that have, at varying levels of success, kind of gone out there and done it, especially from a very young age. So I imagine that all of that experience kind of helps going forward with your solo project.
For sure. For sure. I mean, for me, the experience is the main thing right now. I mean, as far as contacts go, I did take a long break between Shikamin and launching my project. And it's a project that's entirely like French music. So with Shikamin, I always did some French music, but we were very much touring in the English market. So I'm finding myself in a weird spot where like clearly I can speak English and and like most of my contacts are kind of in the English world and they're older contacts, right? Like
Yeah,
stuff has changed so much since like I left Shikamin. And I haven't really toured much, so I'm having to kind of reconnect with people and like start from scratch in certain ways, but then at the same time, like I have the experience. I have also like a great group of people around me to help me build something and realize kind of what's been in my mind for so long. Um, but it is a bit of a weird spot to be in, like I'm a francophone living in Winnipeg. I do only French music, although I'm fully capable of doing like a bilingual show in the sense that I can speak English,
yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
And sometimes I find it much easier to express myself in English than in French, for talking, anyways. Singing and making music or writing songs is a little bit different, obviously, which is why I write in French. But there's not really a French industry here, right? So I really want to be doing more out west and different places around Canada, kind of tapping back into the markets and where I was playing with Chic Amin, but I'm finding it a little bit more difficult than I thought. And I think that I have to probably um, focus more on the French markets, but that's a whole new territory for me.
Yeah, yeah, and I was going to ask about that too because I mean, although obviously things have like I think because of the internet and because of the way people sort of consume music and share music nowadays, everything has gotten mixed up as far as genres and styles, and everyone listens to everything now, which is great. But I do feel
Yeah.
like the francophone music community is still a very separate thing. There are definitely bands and artists that cross over and that have audiences in the English crowd and the French crowd,
Hmm,
but there's still sort of this very distinct in this province anyway, French music scene. And so, what do you think?
for sure.
Did you like having that as it's kind of its standalone? I don't know what you want to call it, like cultural item, I guess, or would you rather see the French get more kind of integrated with the overall Manitoba music scene, which is primarily in English, if that makes sense?
Sorry, my earbuds. Yeah, totally. I totally understand. It's funny because I think there are perks to being just French, and you get like these cool opportunities that you wouldn't get, in a sense, if you were doing English music only. Um, but because I really would like to keep feeling like I'm part of like the Manitoba music community and play just not just at the francophone venues,
Yeah,
I want to play for my peers and with the people, um like the musicians with whom I kind of grew up making music that are kind of, on the anglophone side, if you will. um I would love to be doing more, and I think people are open to it. I don't think it's because they're closed to it. I think for me, because I am kind of starting out again, in a sense, I think a lot of people aren't aware of what I'm doing.
sure.
And that might be part of it. And I don't have a huge draw, like at this point. But I think I would really love to just tap back into that market and have that flexibility to like go between both the French and the English world. Um, but yeah, I'm just trying to figure it out right now. I don't exactly know where I fit in. I know where I want to fit in. I want to be able to navigate those two industries and do music for just anybody. I know that there are a lot of people who are open to listen to French music. There's a lot of people who listen to music that don't have lyrics and that are totally
Yeah,
into it, and you go to the folk fest and there's people from all over the world doing music in all kinds of languages and everybody's enjoying it. And same with the jazz fest. So
totally.
I'm really hoping that, yeah, I'll be able to kind of jump back in and do those kinds of shows again.
Well, I think there's a surprising number of people in Winnipeg too, and in Manitoba that understand French at least, whether they speak it
For
fluently
sure.
or not. They have, I mean, they could have been in French immersion. They could have just taken basic French at school. Maybe they watched French cartoons as a kid. I mean, and they have some kind of
Totally.
at least basic knowledge of the language, enough that they can kind of it's an in for them, right? They can understand the song titles. They can understand the basic message, if not clearly understand everything you're singing about. And so there's kind of like this
Totally.
underground, like in the French closet, people who speak the language or understand it, and I just haven't sort of they're not publicly using it every day.
Yeah, for sure. And like I think, it wouldn't take much for those people who have studied at some point to kind of get back into it. Case in point, our friend Alexa Dirks, who, when we were in Chicamin, like she took French in school, in high school, and she wasn't speaking a lot. And then when she started, when she joined the band, she was like, we were four French speakers, and she was the only one that wasn't like born a French speaker, and she got used to it real fast and started
Yeah.
like actually even speaking in French at shows and stuff like that. So to all of you who feel like you can't, don't give up. You can do it. And the best way to do it is through music. Even like whether it's the reading lyrics or um just coming to listen, you'll catch a few words here and there. You don't have to have a conversation, and you don't have
Yeah.
to worry about not being good enough or fluent enough, like you know just being there is awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm one of those people too. I was in French immersion all through school, and I still watch movies in French sometimes. I listen to hockey games in French on the radio, but I never
Awesome.
speak it. I never have an opportunity to speak it. And I think at this point, I'm in that group of people who's kind of like I'm embarrassed by my accent at this point, but I will gladly seek out French music and French art and everything else. So I think there's a lot of us just kind of in the underground who have
Totally.
this
But you
skill
know
they haven't
what
used in years.
like a lot of fluent French speakers are in that same boat, oddly enough. Like in Winnipeg, obviously we're a minority, or in
Yeah,
Manitoba even. And people are super self-conscious of their French, and like they feel very judged, and they are very judged. That is the thing. I know French speakers that choose not to write music in French for that reason, because the French is scrutinized. Like there's like this weird old school kind of thing where you're you kind of get shunned if you're not perfect, but nobody's perfect. And like me, like doing interviews in French, I still get stressed out by it. It's because I'm very conscious of the fact that they are listening, and they're listening to my accent that is not from Quebec, not from France,
sure.
and judging it. And I'm overthinking everything. So don't worry, like, you're not alone in your in that. Like we all feel that way.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear. So with this project, your solo project now, when it comes to you mentioned earlier about writing in French and what is it that what is the difference for you? I mean, as someone who speaks both languages, as far as writing songs in English versus French, is French just more naturally comfortable, or do you feel like you can express things differently in each language, or are they about the same for you at this point?
They're very different. I feel like expressing myself in English when I speak, like sometimes I have more ease doing that. But when I write, I feel like things don't come out as well. I feel like the French language allows me to kind of create imagery and like just some sort of like poetry much easier than I would in English. And I don't know if it's because I've been oversaturated with like crappy pop tunes in English and I just like naturally go to the cliche and I'm not into it, or if it's just like I also just don't have as much experience writing in English. Like I'm a little bit more fine-tuned in French. But also like the musicality of the language is very different.
Sure,
So
yeah, yeah,
so that will determine like what kind of melody, what kind of beat, whatever goes with that language, right? So it's interesting because like you if you listen to, you know, people doing soul music or like funk music in English, like that's, you know, it's what we grew up listening to. That's the language for me, that music, you know, that I'm used to hearing it in.
yeah.
Um so hearing it in French is like so weird because musically speaking, like it sounds not the same. Not to say that it's wrong, because I think, you know, we can all express ourselves the way we want, but it never sounds as authentic because that's not what I heard it sung. That language I heard it sung in at first, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't have the same oomph.
Well, I'm gonna. It's interesting you mentioned funk and soul because in listening to some of your stuff before we did this interview, there definitely seems to be some of that in there. I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna ask you the worst question that everyone hates answering, but it's the how do you define what it is that you do? And I know the reason it sucks is because there's so many subgenres and subgenres of
Yeah.
subgenres of subgenres these days, and it's all so vague. But I mean, there's obviously pop influence. There's obviously some funkier stuff happening in the background. There's some electronic things. How do you define it?
Hmm.
If you have to do like a Cole's Notes kind of quick version of what you play.
Well, I guess it's like Franco alternative pop,
Okay, okay,
but with like, you know, because of everything that I've done, like musically speaking, I've, you know, been in kind of a world music band. I've been in a kind of pop, very soul, funky
yeah,
influenced band. Like I have those different notes, and jazz too. I would think. Although I think you can categorize almost anything as jazz. So, um, so yeah, I think like it's hard to classify. To me, that's probably the closest thing. It's definitely pop. It's kind of a different kind of than what you would hear in the mainstream for sure.
yeah.
So I say classify it as francophone as well, alternative pop,
Okay, well
with like, you know, influences from all those places.
that's descriptive though. But francophone alternative pop it's definitely a more kind of nailed in genre than just saying it's
Yeah,
pop or just saying it's yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
for sure, for
So
sure.
you have a record coming out next month, and so in
Yeah.
this kind of weird environment that we're in for music now, where it's very different than it was even 5, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, as far as how music is promoted, how it's put out there, how it's defined, like we just kind of determined with the genres. What is it like for you now to release an album in 2023 in this kind of world where you don't necessarily know where people are going to get music from because there's so many different options where they can hear it, and like everyone and their dog is putting records out, which is great, but it kind of makes it harder to make yourself heard. What is that like for
For
you, kind of
sure.
knowing that you're entering this weird online world where there's so much music out there, and you obviously want yours to get ears on it, right? You want people to listen to it, but is that a difficult sort of thing to wrap your mind around?
Well, I feel like it's like this mechanical thing. Like you know what you have to do and you just do it. And then the odds are the odds, you know,
Right.
like you might end up on a playlist. If so, you'll get few more listens than you would otherwise. I'm not touring right now, so I mean, I'm not going to be getting a ton of, you know, I'm not expecting to be like discovered or like, you know, to get huge amounts of listens. Like I'd like to get more.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
um but I think right now it's like I just focusing on making the music, and because that's my favorite part is, you know, the creative process, the nerding out on like arranging a tune and just working with friends to kind of bring it to the next level and to share it, you know. um so it's like, of course, my goal would be to just to have more people hear it and share it with more people on the road. And but for now, it's like it's a mechanical process. Like I know what I have to do. I have to, you know, promote it online. I have to create posts. I have to be in communications with my graphic artists and
Yeah.
create the artwork for the single and like give it to my distributor and like try to get, you know, as much stuff that I can be heard on radio, online. Yeah, lots of I think I think it would be a game changer if I could um sorry, my ears keep falling out. My ears are too small for these things. If I could land on some really listen to playlists, I mean, I think it would be helpful, but that's totally out of my control. So at some point you just have to be like, I'm doing this because I love it.
Yeah.
I'm showing it to people because I love it. I'm hoping that it will help me kind of eventually grow this project and ideally like grow this ecosystem of a creative life that I so that I can just keep doing it and sharing it. And that's my goal right now.
I think that's a really good attitude to have towards it too. Is kind of not yeah, not expecting that you're gonna suddenly blow up, but if it happens, it's great, right? And you're doing it anyway,
Yeah,
regardless of what the yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, I guess
for
that
sure.
probably comes with experience too, right? I mean, you have a lot of people who start out, they put out a record, they think, oh, this is going to be amazing, and then it gets, you know, not the numbers they're expecting, and they get bummed out. But I mean, you know how the
Yeah.
process works, and you've been through this, you've put out records, you've so you have a kind of a better grasp on it, I would think.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh, I think we just lost. I'm going to pause the recording here. Here we go.
I don't know why these ears keep on falling out, and that's part of the problem, maybe.
I don't know. But I was going to ask you, with this record, what are the details on the album? When does it come out? When? How can people hear it? And then how can people see you live?
Well, the album is coming out on April 14th online. And I'm doing a big concert, an album release, first time I do that on my own, on April 15th at the CCFM.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Um, yeah, and it's like it's a pretty big project. Like I've never put on this kind of show. I've been doing shows forever, but I've never like it's the first time I'm working with somebody to design like decor, lighting design, and all that stuff. So it's pretty exciting, a little bit
Yeah.
scary. But for now, like that's kind of where I put all my eggs in that basket. And I'm hoping to get a few other gigs, probably going to be more local this summer. Um, and yeah, so that's where I'm at for that.
Does that those design elements and everything, is that all connected to sort of the themes and the topics in the record and the artwork on the record and things like that?
Yeah, well, I kind of launched my project with a specific aesthetic in mind. Like, I really love black and white images, photos. I feel like when we look at them, we kind of see them from a different perspective because it's lost some of the coloring, and so you're focusing on different things. And that's kind of my goal when I'm writing now is to kind of dig a little bit deeper and kind of look at things from a different perspective to offer something different to the listeners and to myself as well, because I've never necessarily been the kind of person who questioned a lot and who was always looking for answers. And now I'm learning to do that. Um, so yeah, the theme, like the visual theme for my project is definitely black and white. All the images that I share most of the time, anyways, are kind of black and white. And I was hoping to create some sort of a link between the visuals that I share online or that I'm going to have on the album with the actual show.
Oh,
And
cool.
I always wear the black and white stuff, but we're just bringing it a little bit further with the decor and yeah. So it was something. I was lucky enough to get some funding from Manitoba Arts Council, and so I was able to do something like this. And it's really nice because I launched the project during the pandemic, and so um, I didn't get to do an album release the first time, and I haven't really been able to get going on touring and stuff because every time I kind of take momentum, I kind of lose it with the shutdowns.
Yeah,
Anyway,
of course, yeah, yeah,
so now because I wasn't already kind of going before that, it's taken a bit more time to get going. So what's nice about this is that like I'm able to really focus my energy on making this and solidifying something so that when it comes time to share it, when I'm ready to bring it on the road, then we'll be ready to go.
cool. And the good thing about this being a
Yeah.
podcast is someone could hear it the day it comes out, or they could hear it a year from now, and by then you could have new
Yeah.
music out. You could have more shows happening. What's the
Yeah.
best way to find you online and sort of keep track of what you're doing as far as shows and releases and things like that?
Well, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, not yet on TikTok. I'm not, I'm an old dog, you know? So yeah, I mean it's Sala Music with a Q-U-E
The
because
French
it's
way.
French. Yeah. And I have a website as well. But yeah, social media is definitely the easiest way to find me.
Cool.